Monsignor Pilato mentioned that extensive interview instrument for teachers. Somewhere on the links connected to me, you should find a principal candidate interview. And I know Father Chris used this when he was in the search process. I just go through some of the questions. What do you understand by the expression practicing Catholic? Are you a practicing Catholic? Did you attend Catholic schools, elementary, secondary, college, graduate? Are you married? If so, in the church? Do you have children? If so, do they attend Catholic schools? If not, why not? Should you obtain a position in our school, do you intend to enroll your children in our school? Ecclesiastical documents speak of a Catholic head of school as a leader in faith development. How do you see yourself fulfilling that role? A child is presented for enrollment. Its parents are cohabitating or gay or divorced and remarried. How would you handle each situation? It's come to your attention that a faculty member belongs to a political or social organization opposed to one or more of the church's teachings. What's your response? How do you see yourself as principal in relation to the parish at large, the pastor, the civil community? What is the purpose of a Catholic elementary school? How do you plan on conducting faculty development in terms of faith matters and academic dimensions? Who are your models for Catholic educators? Have you read Cardinal Newman's idea of a university? What do you think of it? Do you think it has any relevance for an elementary school? What would you look for in hiring a teacher? What kind of experience do you have with K-8 children? Are you comfortable working with a predominantly or exclusively female faculty? What about working with sisters? And last, what's your notion of discipline? So it's amazing. People do all kinds of prep, as they say, for interviews, but throw some of these questions at people preparing to do a interview to be a Catholic school principal, and they're stunned, many of them. And the fact that they're stunned already tells you they're in the wrong business, okay? And so when we talk about the priest as the public relations man for the school, what I mean very simply is we are public persons ourselves. We obviously have a public role within the community of the church, but we also have a public role vis-a-vis civil society. And it's incumbent on us to make sure that everybody, both in the parish community and in the civil community, understand the critical importance of the school, of our parish school. Father Chris's bishop gave a talk, was invited to give a talk to the Fall River Chamber of Commerce. What was that, about 3 years ago?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
4 actually. And he had the temerity to talk about the importance of Catholic schools to the civil community and specifically to the business community. And I think we have to be, well, when some of us were on with that conversation with President Trump with Catholic educators about, 6 weeks ago or so, first thing he said was, you Catholics ought to toot your horn a lot better than you do. And he said, most people don't know the stuff you're telling me. He didn't know. Cardinal O'Malley said to him that the Catholic schools of Boston save the taxpayer $1 billion a year. He said, could you repeat that, please? And he did. And he said, who knows that? Now, when Bishop Bevilacqua was the auxiliary bishop in Brooklyn before going to Pittsburgh and eventually to Philadelphia, he developed a policy that in front of every Catholic school, there was to be a sign that said, St. Cunegunda School saved you, the taxpayer, X million dollars a year. So whatever the going rate was in the public district, $15,000 a year multiplied by 300 kids. And he was criticized for that by Catholics who said, "Oh, that's crude. Why would you do that?" And he said, "No, I want to let them know what this school is doing for this community." And just in terms of very crass monetary issues, right? If we closed up, here's what would be in your ballpark. And I still think it's a, I think I also gave you somewhere in those items a possible bumper sticker. My Catholic school saves you, the taxpayer. Okay, that's people. You know, they can have all kinds of ideology, but ultimately, people make most of their decisions on the basis of the checkbook. And when it comes down to the dollars and the cents, that starts to make sense to people, and because they don't even think about that. The average citizen doesn't think about that issue. And in terms of both the priestly presence and the priest as the public relations man, I'd love to give the example of, surprise, surprise, Cardinal Newman. Now, most people, most informed people, know of his involvement with Catholic higher education. It's very little known that the apple of his eye was the oratory school that he started, which still exists, a K-12 school, which has shifted locations numerous times in history. It's now outside of Oxford, and we were at a conference. There's a group called the Faith Movement in England, which was started about 30 years ago, and it's a faith development program for young Catholic adults. And they have a conference every year at that site. And in that present building where they are is where Tolkien started to write The Lord of the Rings. And all of the marvelous graduates, Belloc and all of those great Catholic thinkers of the late 19th, early 20th century, those gentlemen were educated at the oratory school. But what about, was Newman simply the inspiration for it? No, he was involved in every single aspect of the life of that school, of starting it, of maintaining it. Even as a cardinal, he tutored the kids in their state exams, all right? He played literally second fiddle in the school band as a cardinal. And he wrote plays for the kids, Latin plays that they were to produce. And there are all kinds of wonderful testimonies of what the Brits call the old boys, and that means the graduates of the school, saying the impact that Cardinal Newman, Father Newman, and Cardinal Newman had on their formation, their human formation, as well as their spiritual formation. And just a couple of quotes. He became a cardinal in 1879, and then there were all kinds of celebrations in England for him when he came back from Rome with his red hat. And the Oratory School Society said this to him: "Just 20 years ago, you generously founded the Oratory School, and you have always cheerfully shared in the burden of toil and self-sacrifice which that act has entailed. We, on our part, gratefully acknowledge the benefits derived from the privilege of your personal influence and guidance after the wise and gentle way of St. Philip." Personal influence. This was the big, big mantra of Newman, the critical influence of the individual person. And that the Oratory Society would point that out specifically. This is what you did for us. And then he gives a response to them. He said, your letter is the best reward, short of supernatural, for much weariness and anxiety in time past. So he admits this is a lot of work. That's why a lot of priests don't want a parish or a school. You've got to do the right thing. It takes work, blood, sweat, and tears. At the same time, nothing involves greater responsibility. A school such as ours is a pastoral charge of the most intimate kind. Most men agree in judging that boys, instead of remaining at home, should be under the care of others at a distance. And of course, this is a boarding school. Boys need that moral and intellectual discipline which school alone can give. Their parents then make a great sacrifice and also make an act of supreme confidence in committing their dear ones to strangers, right? So he acknowledges the fact that we have a fiduciary responsibility for these children because parents have confided them to us. No other department of the pastoral office requires such sustained attention and such unwearied services. And he says, a parish priest who's not involved in the school, he said, he sees people, the kids from time to time, sometimes he hears their confessions. He said, but the priest in the school is with those kids day in and day out. And he makes an interesting observation that that he gets to know the kids, yes, but the kids also get to know him. And that's that winning combination. Huh? And he talks about personal influence. Let me just turn the page here. Then the masters and the boys of the oratory school said to him, many of us have been formed by your teaching, and molded, we hope, by your example. All of us know or have heard often from others of the wonderful way in which God's grace has, for more than 30 years, enabled you by your writings to defend and illustrate the Church of God. All of us are now, by a singular privilege, the children of your house, the daily witnesses of your more private life, and the recipients of your constant teaching and guidance. And therefore we claim a more intimate share in the joy which is so universal, namely his being made a cardinal. Isn't that a wonderful testament, huh? That these graduates would say, you know, we're the children of your house. And someone was mentioning earlier about Sister Elizabeth talking about the priest as father, and the fathers have sons. That these young men would say, yeah, this is what you did for us, and we remember it. So let's allow the others to weigh in on suggestions on how to make the school better known, both in the parish community and in the civil community as well. So, Father Chris, you want to kick off?
Yes. One of the things that I took actually as a suggestion from you is actually preaching about Catholic schools and Catholic education from time to time, and recognizing that though the parishes I had been involved with had a school, there were many, many people in the pews who either weren't aware of it, were cursorily aware of it, or weren't really interested in the fact that this is something that was of the utmost importance to the very existence of that parish. And so I'd preach about the importance of Catholic education. Certainly Catholic Schools Week would be an opportunity to do that. Other times of the year, as the readings lent themselves to it, I would mention something about the school. I'd tell stories about things that I had done in the school with the children, or things that they had taught me through funny anecdotes of one way or the other, just to highlight to the fact to the parish, at least the mass goers, that the school exists. In every parish I'd been assigned with, though there was a school, there was also a sizable program of religious education for children who we had once a week. And some of them would come to Mass with their parents. The attendance at Sunday Mass for religious education students was rather abysmal, but I always considered it to be a soft target as far as pitching the idea of Catholic schools, because they're at least coming to learn something from us. It should be an opportunity to reach out to students who we may want under our tutelage and instruction, and to offer that Catholic education. Most schools have some open seats in them, at least in this part of the country. I'm not aware of any schools that are so bursting at the seams that we have extensive wait lists anymore. And in fact, throughout this diocese, we're they just closed some down using this virus as the excuse to do it. And it's a sad state of affairs that enrollment in Catholic schools and involvement in Catholic families in parish life, in parochial life, is just diminishing to a certain regard. So that was one thing that I found as kind of an easy way to bring it a heightened awareness to the Catholic education front, to the school's existence. I would do promotional things for the school when they would have open houses and stuff like that. They'd often ask me to be in pictures that they would put in the local newspapers or something like that, or to record a radio spot here and there to advertise an upcoming open house. And I mean, those are what they are. But I think reaching out to the folks that are already Catholics, are already practicing, and may not be aware of the school's existence or what they're doing, to highlight to them the opportunities that are offered through the school, I think is of the utmost importance. The other thing that I have found to be of crucial importance in recent years has been the active use of social media, and that could be short videos, that could be pictures. I don't think anything sells the school as much as happy kids, pictures of happy kids. And last night when Rick and Vera were talking, and Chris York as well, they were talking about how one of the greatest advertisements for your school are the students, are your own children, kind of thing. And as a spiritual father for that community, I think one of the greatest things that really sells the school is the positive experience of the students that are currently there. So trying to highlight things going on at the school, putting it out through social media, recognizing that this is where most parents and most young families are soaking it in, or finding their attachment to the world these days are through these social media outlets. It's really a means of meeting people where they are and offering true accompaniment that leads them to an end, namely behind one of the desks in our schools. And I know of, in my previous assignment, 5 families who came to our schools, and I would always make a point of enrolling families. It was on rare circumstances that I would take one student from a family and not the whole family. I really wanted to enroll the whole families in our schools, but 5 families who came from neighboring towns to where we were, came to our school because of things that they had seen on social media or shared by existing school parents on social media. So I think in the PR front, that is of absolute importance these days.
Father mentions the homily. Again, I put a sample on there of a homily that I often give. And it's interesting. Priests are often afraid to deal with the school issue in a very public way. Some of them are like Nicodemus. They'll slink around the school quietly, but they don't want to upset other people by their presence. And what I mean is this: if you're going to be promoting the school, you're going to get some significant pushback from different lobby groups within the church. The first will be the public school teachers, who will be offended because if you say what we are and therefore what they are not, that's going to cause offense. Secondly, parents who will have their consciences pricked by your saying you better have better priorities. And last but not least, the CCD lobby, which is incredibly powerful in many, many places. And I had the experience a number of years ago preaching in a parish in the Archdiocese of Denver. I was preaching at all the weekend masses and then doing a faculty in-service program that following Monday. And I was both the celebrant and the homilist for the Saturday Vigil Mass. And in the middle of the homily, an entire pew got up and walked out. And I said to the pastor afterwards, "Who were they?" And he said, "Oh, that's the family of the principal of the local public school." And you know, most priests by nature are pleasers, and they're given to conflict avoidance. I always say, though, if you're into conflict avoidance, you generally find yourself in a lot more conflict than you would if you confronted the thing head on. But at any rate, that's one of the reasons that most priests don't want to get talking too much in a public way that would cause dissent. Secondly, I would suggest something that's very practical. Look at your baptismal statistics and look at who were the kids that were baptized 3 or 4 years ago, and send a letter to those parents saying, "I'm sure by now you're already looking at the educational possibilities for your children. At the baptismal ceremony, you promised before God and the church that you were going to raise these children in the faith. The most effective way to do that is by having them in a Catholic school. I want to invite you to come with your child, visit our school, come look at it, and I hope that's going to lead to your registering your child there." That's a rather innocuous thing, but it's also very practical. Along with Father Chris's suggestion about social media, also be sure there's something in the parish bulletin about the school on a regular basis. I mean, even if it's a silly cupcake sale, but let people know it exists. I mentioned last night, but it bears repeating, the parish school needs to be on the parish website. Right? There was a priest that was a friend of mine and was recently appointed a pastor of a parish with a school. And he called me and said, "You know, can we have lunch? The school is tanking, and I don't know what the reason is." In fact, he had 4 habited nuns in the school and still wasn't doing well. And he said, "You know, come and have lunch and maybe we can come up with some kind of a plan." So before going over to visit him, I went to the parish website and I couldn't find the school. And then I looked at back parish bulletins and the school wasn't listed on the bulletin either. And so when I went to his rectory, I said, "By the way, you know, the first issue before we go out to lunch is you got to get the parish school onto the parish website." And he said, "Well, of course it's there." I said, "I don't believe so." I said, "Let's go look." And he looked and he said, "Well, I'll be." It wasn't there. His predecessor hadn't put it there. They had a separate website, but that's, again, fostering a very bad notion of a parish school, right? It's an entity unto itself. Well, it's not, right? Canonically and civilly, it's not. It's intimately connected to the parish. So to be sure that the school is listed on the parish bulletin, and where you have the cast of characters, you know, the bereavement counselor and every other, you know, hospitality committee chairman, that the principal's name is on the parish bulletin. She's a key individual in the life of the parish. And so even some, I see at times they have the name of the school and a phone number, but no mention of the principal. Right? She's key to the whole project. She ought to be there. Okay. Where is Father Richard? Oh, there he is. Okay. He inherited a situation some years back and did yeoman duty with the school. And so let him tell you some of his projects and how he brought them about. You're not on.
Here we go. Thank you, Father Peter. My name is Father Richard Breton. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Norwich in Connecticut. I've been ordained 13 years now. And a few years ago, I was assigned to a parish with a school, and the school was virtually dying. When I arrived, the school only had about maybe 70 students in it, and I was told to just do whatever and just be there and do whatever I could. And I said, well, I had to save the school. I had to do the best that I can. So I ended up, like many of you have mentioned today, was always visible in the school, was there every day, walking through, visiting the classrooms just to say hello, was in the parking lot with the children when they were coming in and when they were leaving, started speaking in the parish masses about how important the school was, that the parish school was the life of our parish, and it was, you know, part of who we were. And I eventually invited Father Peter to come in to preach during Catholic Schools Week to encourage the parishioners. The previous administration had built up a building, a food pantry with 3 garages to block the view from the rectory and the church to the school, because he wanted nothing to do with it. And so there was already a battle in the school that, and in the parish, that they were 2 separate groups. So I worked hard to try to encourage that. But one of the things that I did that I thought was interesting is I had gotten wind that one of the neighboring Catholic schools over the border in Rhode Island was closing, and I had gotten the date of when they were announcing it to their students and to the parents. So I gathered up my principal and a couple of the teachers and took one of these pop-up tents in our school sign and went to that school, and it was across the street in the park as they were all leaving after getting the news that their school was closing. And we picked up all of their children from grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we increased our enrollment from like 70 something kids to about 150, 160 kids by the time I was done there. In the course of all that, everyone kept saying that there was no money, that it was a poor parish, that it was a poor community, and that unless you find money to help the school, that it wasn't going to survive. And just for my being actively involved, one day after Mass, a husband and wife came up and said, "Father, I have something for you for the school and for the parish." And they gave me an envelope, and they said, "Well, are you going to open it?" And I said, "Well, okay." So I opened the envelope, and they gave each, the school and the parish, a check for $350,000 to increase, and to maintain the school and the parish. We worked hard to keep things going. As Father Peter said earlier, I made use of Rediscovering a Catholic Philosophy by Curtis Hancock, and every month we'd meet with the teachers to go over one chapter at a time, go over the questions at the end, and we try to get the school back on track. The children knew me by name, I knew the children by name, and even so that when I was out in the community, either at the grocery store or at a restaurant or something, the children and parents would come up and say hello, and the kids would yell, "There's Father Richard," and everything. And I even went as far as, some thought this was a little bit crazy, but I took some business cards and had them printed double-sided with the parish on one side, the school information on the other side. Whenever I was out having dinner or at the store, if I saw a family that had children, I would approach them, give them the card, and invite them to come visit our Catholic school. And got many students to come and to join our school through those different things. Sadly, I was removed.
Well, wait a minute. Your critical thing, you brought in...
Oh, yes. I also I brought back in the religious sisters that had been in the school about 30 years prior and were kicked out. And I brought back the same community, 2 religious sisters, to teach 2nd grade as well as 7th grade. and science, and that was a wonderful gift to the parish to have the religious sisters back teaching, the Sisters of Our Lady Mother of the Sisters of Our Lady Mother of the Church of Charity, and it was a wonderful gift to have the nuns back there. And then I was transferred to my current assignment, and sadly, after all of the work that I did and all the hard work increasing enrollment, last week the school closed permanently.
Oh.
After doing all that work, and when I left, there was no interest at all in saving the school. There was no interest at all in doing anything. It just plummeted. People left, and now it's gone. So it's very sad. So the role of the priest is very important in the school, and I never thought that my involvement in a school would be so important, because growing up, I'll be honest, I never liked school. So now being in the other role of promoting the school and being there and helping it to grow, it's very important. And I'm very sad that the school closed. And I hope that someday in the future that I'll be assigned again to another school to help to do God's work, to bring about our Catholic education to our young people.
You see, gentlemen, the problem I highlighted the other day. It's wonderful to revive something, but then what happens? You go, and someone else has absolutely no interest. It atrophies, and this is the sad story at the end of the line. So his work for, 2.5 years, 3 years, went down the toilet in a very, very short period of time, because the wrong man was put there, and no interest. In addition to which, and he didn't tell that part of the story, but the diocese also wanted to get its hands on the money from that major gift.
Yep.
Who else do we have? Monsignor Sal, do you have anything you want to add to the PR front?
It's a miscellaneous list, no particular order. You had mentioned the baptisms, and to amplify that, if we don't have the big numbers of baptisms like we did in the old days, so it would be very easy for somebody in the school to send out a congratulations card right shortly after the baptism. Just give over the birth date and the address, the parent's name, and they can do a handwritten card with a brochure of the school. They could even do a birthday card each year until it's time for them to apply. It's very easy to do. You just get a stack of birthday cards at Hallmark, and a secretary can prepare the envelope. The principal writes the message, put in the flyer, and it could go a long way. A lot of our elementary schools in our diocese started doing that.
I also mentioned with the baptism, I never do a baptism without in the homily specifically mentioning that I hope you realize the critical importance that how we as a parish community are going to be able to assist you in fulfilling the promises that you've just made with the parish school. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's a good reminder for me, because now our deacon's sick, and usually deacons get the baptisms around here, so now I have them all, so I can do that now. The regular homily, as Father Chris mentioned, at least during Catholic School Week, but more than that. And something related to that, out here, I don't know if you have it on the other side of the country, the Latino marriage encounter people will show up. They'll give you a list. They show up maybe quarterly. They give a little fervorino after the announcements, and then they're outside with tables, and they have their red shirts that say marriage encounter. And they're very organized. They do it in several parishes. If we had a parent or different parents and even students who spoke quarterly after all the masses and had a table outside, that would be a great way to get more interest. And people always gravitate to those tables to see what's going on, especially if there's a donut or something at the table. The city council, if you're in a small town, city council likes to bring in people to do the opening prayer or lead the Pledge of Allegiance. And if your school isn't being invited or you're not being invited, find a way to get invited. And if it's the kids doing the Pledge of Allegiance, show up with them and sit in the audience with the kids and with their parents. That's a pretty visible thing. Preschools. Not sure in other parts of the country, but out here, most of our towns and cities have a lot of preschools that are privately run or that are, there might be secular. If you're near the inner city, they're more small mom and pop operations. But my experience has been, as we were running the marketing program for the schools, teaching the elementary schools and the high schools how to do marketing, that these preschools were very open to letting the local school come in to do a little recruitment pitch, or to bring in packets for the kids to take home, all types of things. So, and you might be surprised at how, depending on the size of your city, how many preschools are in your neighborhood that you could approach. Some of our schools did a great job of, even at the high school level, going to the charter schools, the charter elementary schools, and being allowed to go to an open house for the high schools, being included in that, or providing packets for the 8th graders. So there's a lot of possibilities even in the public school or secular realm. Another idea is creating very creative, nice looking, attractive brochures and getting the school parents to put them in the lunchrooms of their place of work. If they're working at a big place like a major hospital or at a huge factory, being able to get those posters and flyers on the bulletin boards in those lunchrooms can reach people. You know, out here, I'm not sure about other parts of the country, but out here, a lot of our hospitals are filled with nurses and other medical people that are Filipino and thus Catholic. And so there's a Catholic audience at least in a hospital. So that's one possibility. Father had mentioned being in the bulletin regularly, having a blurb in the bulletin. One thing I do in our bulletin with regard to, we have a program called Retro-Vi. It's kind of there's engage encounter, marriage encounter, and then Retro-Vi is for the troubled marriages. And I have about 6 or 7 or 8 different bulletin notices in English and Spanish. And every week there's something on Retro-Vi for troubled marriages, but it's a 6-week rotation, so it always looks like it's something new. I'm just thinking out loud that maybe creating like a 6 or 7-week rotation of something on the parish school in both languages, and then just running it every week would be very easy to do. It's just a cut and paste. And if there's enough of them, 6 or 7, people will always think they're new. They might not recognize that they've read it before. We have when I was still in the downtown office, we had an elementary school in East Los Angeles where the pastor was actively speaking out against the school. He was a religious, old-time religious, Divine Word missionary, and it was very negative on the school. He encouraged parents to take their kids out of the school. It was really bad. That particular order out here had issues, but the diocese took over the school, elementary school, sent in a new young principal who had been a teacher at one of our high schools, and she was a fireball. She got to the school and there were only 30 kids registered. The previous principal didn't even bother with the registration. And that summer, and the school was in a horrible shape, mice, rats, no money. She had to get cats to take care of the mice. And it was just a horror story. By the end of the summer, she had the enrollment from 30 up to 100. She went door to door in the neighborhood, somehow got a lot of prizes, Xboxes and all these other types of things, and did some type of recruitment with prizes. And if you brought in somebody, you got a prize. I don't know exactly the details of that, but she went door to door, and she went from 30 to 100. And in 3 years or 4 years, she was up at 300. In East LA, and that particular part of East LA, poor neighborhood, not a lot of money for tuition, but she was able to fill the seats. Another angle, and it requires a different type of thinking on the part of principals and maybe pastors, is to get to the point where everybody doesn't have to pay the same tuition. Now, we have to have the costs covered by financial aid. Yes, we have to have the per pupil costs covered. But somebody used to say out here, when you go on an airplane, you know that everyone paid a different price for their ticket. You don't know what they paid, but everybody paid a different price depending on when they bought their ticket. And it's okay with all those empty seats to take that approach. In other words, let's say you start the school year with 20 in a classroom, and you feel comfortable going up to 25 or to 30 or 35, depending on what is the custom at your place. Rather than having empty seats paying nothing, to bring in those kids from the poor family in the RE program who serve Mass faithfully, who are always in the RE office helping, doing paperwork and running errands, good quality kids, to bring them into the Catholic school and just let them pay whatever the parents can afford to pay, give them a little help from the parish. That's, even if they are only paying $100 a month, that's $100 a month you're not getting with an empty seat. And to start thinking in those terms, at least for the empty seats, you're able to reach people that would really benefit from a Catholic education because there's already a foundation of commitment. Now, the tricky part is you don't want the other parents to find this out. That's a tricky part, because then they're going to all want to negotiate tuition. But we have a lot of schools where it's become the expectation, where people just know that tuition is negotiable. And we're in a situation post-COVID or during COVID where that's might become more of the case, depending on how it's affecting your part of the country.
And let me just weigh in on that. It's amazing how tradition-bound, in the worst sense of the word, some priests are. In one of the areas where I had worked, there was a parish school in a ghetto type of environment at that point that was down to about 100 kids, pre-K to 8. And an area that was largely Hispanic, and outside my residence, there was a public school bus that loaded up every morning with 45 Hispanic kids to go to the local public school. And those kids had absolutely no relationship with Christ or the church. I'd be walking outside, praying the office or something, no greeting from them, no acknowledgement, nothing whatsoever. And so I called the pastor and I said, look, and one of our seminarians was teaching in his school. And I said, I would like to suggest that we could go door to door. 3 of us were sufficiently fluent in Spanish. We'd go door to door this summer and first of all, inform these people that there is a Catholic school. One of the problems with Hispanics is they're bringing with them the experience of Latin America, where Catholic schools are academies for the wealthy. They have no idea how cheap our schools really are to start with. I said that we would go door to door, and he said, well, that's a nice idea, but they don't have the money. I said, well, you don't know that. And I said, and this is Father Sal's point, I said, but let's say that they don't have $5,000, but they have 1,000. He said, no, but the tuition is $5,000. I said, let me finish, all right? You have 6 children in the first grade. If you can get 10 or 15 more kids in at $1,000 a head, that's paying half a teacher's salary, all right? Those 15 additional kids are not sucking up more oxygen, really, right? The electrical bill is the same, the air conditioning bill is the same, the teacher's salary is the same. But meanwhile, you've got an additional 15,000. Multiply that by 10 classes, all right? That's $150,000 more at a practical level. Secondly, those kids are getting the benefit of a Catholic education. And let's even presume that they don't have $1,000. But a lot of these Hispanic couples have an awful lot of interesting skills. The man may be a carpenter or a contractor of some kind. The mother might be able to work in the school cafeteria, work it off. No, it can't work. And of course, a year later, the place closed. But the lack of creative thinking is absolutely distressing. And then we wonder why we've got the problems that we do. So, but by the way, what you were suggesting, Father, is this kind of tuition as you go or as you can. The Archdiocese of Denver introduced it last year, and Detroit is doing it. Kevin can talk about that later. They're doing it this coming year, I believe, at least unless this COVID thing is going to forestall it. But it's been successful in places where it's been tried, and people do know. And some people have said, well, it's not fair that those people pay less than I pay. Well, that's a rather unchristian attitude, and that person needs to be catechized better, huh? You know, if you're hauling in $150,000 salary and someone else is on food stamps, there's a whole Catholic understanding of mutual responsibility and care for one another. And I think the average person doesn't have that problem and sees it rather clearly. Anything else on your table?
One last thing. Here we have 280 parishes and 218 elementary schools. So in my neighborhood now, we're surrounded by parishes with elementary schools. But when I was living in residence near the airport, all those years, the surrounding parishes had closed schools. And so the pastor, who Father Peter knows, made a point of having some type of contact with those parishes through their bulletins, through occasional presentations with the parents in those parishes. Because they're parishes with families who don't have access to a parish school, but if they know that 5-10 minutes away there is a parish school and they're being welcomed, they might consider you. So it's different in all parts of the country, but if you're surrounded by parishes with no school or a closed school, you can see that as a possible grounds for recruitment. Of course, you have to have a relationship with the pastor, and he hopefully won't feel threatened by you coming in. I've also found that some parishes, because they closed the school, have lost families because the families want to be in a parish with the school because they want their kids to be in the school. So that might be incentive in some places to keep the school going. But there's still parishes without schools that have families that need to be recruited.
All right. Well, we're going to adjourn for Din Din, and we'll come back at 6:15 and be wowed by Brother Owen. And then after him, we're going to have a session on school choice initiatives, which have taken on a new importance in light of recent events. So, see you in an hour and a quarter.